Welcome back into the Sports Source. This segment of our program brought to you by Calhoun's. It is going to be 80 degrees out there today, folks. It may say spring, but in East Tennessee, we have our 2 weeks of winter, and then we slide straight into summer for about 6 months. And what that means is outdoor dining at Calhoun's, downtown, Lenoir City, Oak Ridge, Maryville. Check out a Calhoun's deck or patio this week. Nothing like enjoying the good weather and a taste of Tennessee at Calhoun's. Okay, we're going to talk later about who Butch Jones can depend on this year's football team. What are the 4 most important SEC games? If you can only have 4 wins, if you're going to go 500, which of the 4 does Butch need to keep people somewhat at bay? That's all coming up. First, Bob Shoop has said he wants to use more 4-3 on defense this year. Last year, he finished up the season almost exclusively as a 4-2-5. Do you believe the Vols will wind up running a lot more 4-3 this year? Gentlemen, jump in.
I think yes, because I think Tennessee's defensive staff, I think if you ask Bob Shoop, you ask Tommy Thigpen, the linebackers coach, I think they feel better right now about where they are at linebacker compared to, especially once you get 3-4 weeks into last season when Jalen Reeves-Maybin went down, Cortez Sapp went down with the torn ACL. Cortez McDowell's probably playing heavier now. He's faster, more athletic out there. Austin Smith has moved back to linebacker and I think is impressed. So I think they feel better about the numbers they have at linebacker and believe they will need to use them more.
Yeah, I think it depends on the formation, the offensive formation. I mean, if you're playing a spread team with 4 or 5 wide receivers, you're in a 4-2-5 or maybe even a dime setup with 6 DBs. But I think the emphasis on that 4-3 is more about stopping the run. So you could have a safety walked up into that third linebacker spot, and it looks like a 4-3. Remember what Kiffin did with Eric Berry, actually played linebacker, what Michigan did with Jabril Peppers this past season, a heavier safety down in the box. So I think it will look a lot more like a 4-3 more often, when in fact it may be 4-2-5 personnel depending on how many receivers the other team has on the field.
I think you'll see more 4-3 against Georgia Tech than you will in any other game this year. And then the rest of it's going to be dictated by who you're going against. I mean, the reason everybody in the country is using more and more of this 4-2-5. NFL teams are drafting these guys who play that spur, jack, monster. Every school has its own name, star, for that safety linebacker hybrid. And I think it comes down to Tennessee. Do you have a third linebacker that's good enough to be able to cover a tight end or, worst case scenario, cover a receiver? Or are you better off with multiple safeties? You know, getting another safety out there on the field. Is Nigel Warrior a big enough hitter that you put him in there and you have 2 other safeties playing behind him? So your thoughts? What do you think they should do? More 4-3?
I like the 4-3, but I mean also the game is changing a little bit. I think last year their problems weren't so much schematic as they were you just didn't have players out there good enough to do anything. So I think it comes down, I think Mike's right. You're going to play whatever defense you're going to have to put up against what particular offensive set you've got. But if Tennessee, put it this way, if Tennessee goes to more 4-3 and you get ran on like you did last year, your season's a disaster and it doesn't matter. But I'm thinking last year was more injuries than scheme.
And I think the scheme issue showed up more as you had to put backups in there. You had more busts as the season went on because guys didn't know what they were doing.
I mean, look what Missouri and Kentucky. You can't let teams run on you like Missouri and Kentucky did over, 430 yards apiece? If you pick up where you left off, so you got to be able to change something. And that's what we heard so many times last year. It seemed like Tennessee kept trying to do the same thing. Maybe you didn't have enough healthy players.
Well, the change has got to be at defensive tackle, where instead of having 250-pound guys, you're back to having 290, 300.
If they can stay healthy.
And we've come full circle.
So it'll be interesting to see what they wind up doing. I do think, though, that you may want to play 4-3. But as Mike said, the reason everybody went 4-2-5 is because of the spread offense. We spread you out. We put smaller, faster guys on the field. If they do that and you don't have a third linebacker who can get out there and cover a guy in space, I think you're going to be right back where you are having to do the hybrid with the safety thing and playing 4-2-5. But we'll see. It's going to be interesting. That's a big question going into the fall. How much more of the 4-3 do you see? And I think they've got more bodies at linebacker. They're banged up right now. But I think they'll have more bodies at linebacker this fall. More bodies back there in the secondary that they can play around with this fall.
Yeah, but like Mike said, the defensive tackles, though, I mean, it's your linebackers and safeties, that's great, but you're going to have to come up with somebody who can do something with the offensive line from the get-go, not like what happened last year.
And I think opposing teams are going to make Tennessee prove this year that it can stop the run.
That's a good point. All right. want to remind you or want to tell you what's coming up next week. Look at this. It's our spring wrap-up special. So next Sunday, 11 a.m., orange and white game coverage. We'll talk about the standout performers. We'll break down the quarterback race. Season scenarios for Butch Jones survival. This is going to be interesting. It's not just the record. If you beat this team but lose to that team, what's the reaction? If you go 7-5, but these are the 7 and this is how you get there. If you have this many injuries, we'll talk about scenarios for his security. That's going to be big next Sunday. Mike Griffith, Bob Hodge, Jimmy Himes, Josh Ward join us, plus VFL Sterling Hinton and Will Overstreet, and the return of Mr. 7 Bypass. It's our buddy Bobby Scott. Back from the disabled list. He will be with us next Sunday, 11 a.m. You want to join us then. Come on back on the Sports Source now, and we'll talk about who Butch Jones can depend on this year's team. Proven guys, which means it could be a short segment. Come on back.